Nintendo has been dishing out some incredible video games over the last 35 years and counting. Ask the wide array of Nintendo fans, young and old, and I'm sure they can name a title that was a star of stars amongst the company's heavy-hitting lineups year after year. From the current day all the way back to the earliest days of Nintendo's home console heroics back in 1985, there's been at least one major title that's left waves in the industry, and that has just held up as some exemplary pieces of art. So, in this video, I'm going to go from 1985 to the present and pick which Nintendo game released from a specific year that I think is the company's best work for those 4 seasons. Just some disclaimers going in. I'm organizing the games based on when they were released originally, interchangeably following this short list organized by Nintendo Wiki. So, if some titles are too conflicting, they may be reordered to run down the list better. This is just a preference of order while I was making this list. Speaking of preference, my choices are solely based on my own opinion and reasoning, so don't take them too seriously. And lastly, I have to shout out and credit Nintendo Hero for this idea. They made a fantastic video on the subject earlier this month, and it inspired me to make a list of my own. They make great and detailed Nintendo content, and I 100% recommend you check out their channel if you haven't already. That being said, let's not waste any more time and get right into the list. Starting in 1985, I think the first choice couldn't be more obvious. With the Nintendo Entertainment System taking the market by storm and single-handedly reviving the video game market, the best game of that year had to have been one that would have left a legacy for ages. And while games like Duck Hunt and Excitebike are iconic in their own right, Super Mario Bros. Is simply the one that changed everything. The innovative platformer opened the doors to what 2D platforming and gaming in general could be moving forward, and subsequently launched Nintendo into the household name that it is today. As the NES began to settle into the home market, they began to bring along a handful of their famous arcade games like Donkey Kong and Mario Bros. Onto the console. Other original titles like Balloon Fight and Urban Champion were solid games as well. But the next star IP from Nintendo would surface in Metroid. One of the earliest non-linear home console titles, as well as the earliest to implement a password system, Metroid would kickstart one of the most beloved series in Nintendo's catalog, one that would soon become the face of the golden standard of 2D non-linear platforming. In the year 1987, Mike Tyson would team up with Nintendo to give us the ever-charming and entertaining Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! The original Kid Icarus would release that year as well. But enter The Legend of Zelda. The grand and storied franchise from the mind of Miyamoto will get its humble beginnings on the NES, mixing action, adventure, role-playing, and puzzle genres into one all-encompassing package. Zelda would set the precedent early with a huge overworld, iconic music, and even a battery-backed save system. It was clear from the start that the Legend of Zelda series would become a blue ribbon franchise with a unique take on adventure and a pristine mark of production. In '88, the Nintendo lineup wasn't as fruitful, with the only well-anticipated sequels to the company's 2 largest series at the time in Super Mario Bros. 2 and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. And picking Super Mario Bros. 2 is a no-brainer in my opinion, because while Zelda 2 wasn't a terrible game, the dramatic shift in gameplay style, increase in difficulty, and overall convoluted nature of the game as a whole made it unfavorable very quickly. While on the other hand, Mario 2, albeit a sneaky reskin of the already established Doki Doki Panic, kept the familiar nature of Mario's tried and true gameplay while implementing a refreshing addition of the option to play as not 1, not 2, but 4 different characters with varying abilities. 1989 saw the release of Nintendo's first foray back into the handheld market since they became a major force in the gaming industry, and they did so with the legendary Game Boy system. Being an incredibly successful console, the Game Boy would find its way into millions of homes, and alongside it was Tetris. Super Mario Land would be present for the Game Boy's debut as well, but with the simple puzzle game of Tetris would transcend just the kids who played the game on their console. Everyone on Earth could recognize Tetris if you showed it to them, and a game with that much reach has to be given its credit as the best Nintendo could offer in '88. The turn of the decade was a little more low-key as the big end prepared to warm up the next big console to enter the market. But until then, fans were gifted games like Tetris-derived Dr. Mario and the immersive RPG Star Tropics. However, once again the peculiar plumber would return to his throne with Super Mario Bros. 3, Mario's final mainline title for the NES. SMB3 is regarded as one of the greatest games of all time due to this impressive gameplay polish, refreshing mechanics, and welcoming difficulty adjustments. Enter the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The SNES would mark itself as Nintendo's 16-bit flagship, going up against the likes of the Sega Genesis, the Neo Geo, and the TurboGrafx-16. And it came out firing with titles like the adrenaline-pumping racer in F-Zero and the detailed flight simulator Pilot Wings. But, as you know, it was nothing quite like Super Mario. One of my favorite games of all time, Super Mario World, served as the SNES's launch partner, and what a game it was. With sharp platforming, sharper 16-bit sprite work, plenty of secrets, and, well, Yoshi. Super Mario World remains as one of the series' best all these years later. After Mario received his 16-bit opus at the SNES's debut, it wouldn't be long until Nintendo's other mega hit would get its own. 1992 was a big year for the company. Super Mario Kart kicked off one of the most impactful series in gaming of all time. Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, proved sure of how much creativity and great platforming could fit into the little giant that was the Game Boy. And Kirby's Dream Land marked the debut of the puffball who would go on to start a lineage of lighthearted platforming fun. However, nothing can touch the quality and care that went into The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. The beautiful sprite work, the return of Zelda's immersive overworld gameplay, and the brilliant puzzles and environments have held the test of time as one of Nintendo's best linear experiences, as well as laying the foundation of how grand the storytelling of Zelda could become in the near future. 1993 was a year about continuing momentum for Nintendo. The Zelda series would make its first appearance on the Game Boy with Link's Awakening. Super Mario All-Stars, while successful, was simply an upgraded port of the original NES trilogy, as well as the real version of Super Mario 2, dubbed The Lost Levels. Kirby's Adventure appeared as a late star in the NES library. Being one of the 5 final Nintendo-published titles for the system in North America, Kirby's Adventure was a thorough and charming side-scrolling platformer that challenged just how far the NES could go so late into its lifespan, producing a product that can hold its ground next to the souped-up titles of the superior SNES. Speaking of souped-up titles, however, there was a new series that would epitomize just that. Star Fox would debut in this year. An emphatic rail shooter set in space, Star Fox would utilize the Super FX chip to push the limits between 2D and 3D while still being a few years away from Nintendo's real breakthrough into the third dimension. 94 was quite the year for Nintendo. Super Mario Land 3 Wario Land would give Mario's new arch nemesis Wario a go to take the lead in the third installment of Mario's Game Boy line of platformers. Wario's Woods would make history as the final officially licensed Nintendo game to be released for the NES. And Rare would break through by giving the Donkey Kong character a new life in the astonishing Donkey Kong Country. With precise platforming, unheralded graphic design, and unforgettable music from David Wise, DKC would become one of the defining titles for Nintendo in the 90s. Yet, nothing would become more defining than the long-awaited successor to both Metroid and Metroid 2: The Return of Samus. The aptly titled Super Metroid would perfect the unique style of the action platformer so well that it has left a legacy as one of the greatest games of all time, as well as holding a stake in the endearing term used to categorize the special set of 2D action platformers to follow, dubbed Metroidvania. As the SNES's lifespan began to wane, and as the next revolution in gaming bubbled on the horizon, 1995 nevertheless held a great handful of titles under Nintendo's belt. Mother 2, the cult classic RPG developed by Ape Inc. and HAL Laboratory, would make its way to North America under the title of Earthbound. Its weird take on Japanese RPG gameplay and interpretations of Western humor have made it a standout experience well worth a spin. Super Mario World would net a prequel in Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Despite the game's namesake suggesting a continuation of Mario's 1991 platforming juggernaut, Yoshi's Island would hand the keys over to the franchise's dinosaur pal, beginning a series of stylized 2D platformers featuring Yoshi, his egg-throwing gameplay, and the colorful universe that would continue to appear on Nintendo systems to follow. Donkey Kong Land would highlight the Game Boy's new additions. Acting as somewhat of a sequel to Donkey Kong Country, Land would debut Rare's iteration of the famous Kong and his universe to the handheld market. But the true star in my eyes was Donkey Kong Country's real sequel, Donkey Kong Country 2: Diddy's Kong Quest. Handing the lead role from DK over to his nephew Diddy Kong, Diddy and Dixie would star in what I believe is the peak of the DKC series on the SNES. Its pinpoint platforming, unparalleled score, involving atmosphere, and plethora of well-disguised secrets and Easter eggs make it one of the best platformers ever. Get in or get out. Welcome to the third dimension. After a tumultuous development and release, the Nintendo 64 finally arrived in 1996, officially marking Nintendo's entrance into the 3D space with their 64-bit console. Despite getting a great handful of games for the SNES, such as Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble, Kirby Superstar, and the cult classic Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, all of the focus was on the impressive new N64 titles, and the one that shined the most at launch was the ever-iconic, genre-defining, tone-setting spectacle that was Super Mario 64. Mario's first foray into 3D produced an action platformer with stellar level design, an emphatic soundtrack, and most importantly, an impressive and unprecedented transition from 2D to 3D for the iconic character that's influence can still be felt in the industry today. A couple more games would come onto the scene as the N64 began to cement itself into the market. Diddy Kong Racing was Rare's take on a racing game that has left quite the cult impression amongst the 64 library. However, another racer in particular takes the cake, Mario Kart 64. While not being the first installment in the series, it was the first in my eyes to establish just how alluring the multiplayer aspect of Mario Kart can truly be. But this is a one-of-a-kind year in Nintendo to me because I think I have to give a co-award for this one. And that's due to Star Fox 64 arriving this year as well. To put it simply, the Star Fox series may never be able to eclipse the peak it reached in Star Fox 64. The full 3D capabilities of the N64 allowed Star Fox's rail shooting gameplay to reach its true potential, and the game has received critical acclaim ever since. For this one, I have to be blunt. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was released in 1998. Yes, there was Yoshi's Story. Yes, there was Pokemon Red and Blue. Yes, there was F-Zero X. And it's not to undermine those titles. Yoshi's Story was a fantastic rendition of the new formula in 3D, and Red and Blue would assist the phenomena that was Pokemania in the States. But Ocarina of Time was the game of that year, and arguably the game of the decade. The action-adventure title would encompass a cinematic level of storytelling and establishing settings and characters. The Z-targeting system would revolutionize Zelda gameplay, and the time travel mechanic would open up a massive world to explore in different facets. Due to those qualities, along with the established eliteness of the Zelda franchise before the release of the game, as well as the music and subsequent nostalgia many hold with this title, it is little question as to why Ocarina of Time remains quite literally the most critically acclaimed video game of all time. On the brink of the millennium, the good times kept rolling for Nintendo. Rare would catapult Donkey Kong onto the N64 in the aptly titled Donkey Kong 64. Pokemon Snap was a fun little rail game letting the player take pictures of the colorful cast. Mario Party would start yet another fruitful sub-series of the Mario franchise, where it was all about the turn-based multiplayer action, coupled with a collection of chaotic minigames. The Game Boy Color had a few gems as well, like Bionic Commando, Elite Forces, and Pokemon Pinball. The highlight, nonetheless, was an interesting upstart fighting game that gained momentum by using the familiar faces of Nintendo's IPs, Super Smash Bros. The unorthodox gameplay format of Smash made it stand out as a new and exciting fighter on the market. Featuring 12 of Nintendo's both iconic and lesser acknowledged characters, the stage was set and the potential was imminent of what the series could become soon. Welcome to Y2K. As both the Game Boy Color and the N64 began winding down, there was still an abundance of great games being released as the big N's first in the 21st century. This time around, Nintendo would be the publishers of Rare's legendary Banjo-Kazooie series with its sequel in Banjo-Tooie, while Rare would release the amazing first-person shooter that was Perfect Dark. Mario Party would net a well-received sequel in Mario Party 2. Everyone's favorite pink puffball would make his fashionable and very on-brand late entrance into the third dimension, with Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards. Pokemon would flood the market with games like Pokemon Stadium, Puzzle League, and Challenge, the trading card game for the Game Boy, and even Hey You Pikachu. The most important of the bunch being the mainline sequel to Red and Blue in Pokemon Gold and Silver. But the Big N's premier series would make another effort using the N64 engine. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask took the acclaimed engine of Ocarina of Time and implemented a dark and unnerving story that resonated in its own powerful way. The new additions in gameplay, like changing forms with Mask and the 3-day time limit, kept the game fresh and reinvigorated the series. The uptick in difficulty compared to Ocarina of Time was also a welcomed addition, especially for players who had mastered Ocarina at that point. All in all, the game was still held in high regard, holding a strong cultural relevance in gaming culture, and continuing the streak of outstanding titles under the belt of the Legend of Zelda franchise. 2001, Nintendo was ready to go with their newest console to compete in the 6th generation of gaming, the Nintendo GameCube. The 128-bit lunchbox would have a great set of games in its first year. Luigi's Mansion in particular was a refreshing and charming new series that put Luigi in the front seat for the very first time. Pikmin would start the underrated IP following the little titular species and the astronauts that cooperated with them to beat the real-time strategy gem. The Game Boy would evolve as well, ushering in the Game Boy Advance. Capable of 32-bit graphics, the GBA started off with titles like Mario Kart Super Circuit, the first handheld Mario Kart, F-Zero Maximum Velocity, and Golden Sun. Its predecessor, the N64 and the GBC, were still getting its last bunch of classics, with games like Conker's Bad Fur Day, Zelda Oracle of Ages and Seasons, Mario Party 3, Mario Tennis, and Paper Mario, the newest iteration of Mario's RPG antics, featuring a distinctively stylized graphic approach that upholds the game's titular namesake. But it is without an inch of doubt that the largest release of the year was the follow-up to Super Smash Bros. In Super Smash Bros. Melee. Melee would blow open the potential of the Smash series, doubling its roster, polishing gameplay to a T, and producing an absorbing atmosphere that celebrated all of Nintendo's work from the characters to the stages to the music. The perfect storm that was Melee would help cement it as arguably the series' best, one of the games on the competitive scene with the greatest longevity, and one of the most cherished video games ever. This year, Mario would make his unusually late mainline entrance on the GameCube with Super Mario Sunshine. Although critically acclaimed like a majority of Mario's platformers, it has since become arguably the most polarizing of the 3D platformers. Animal Crossing would make its debut and build upon its Nintendo 64 roots in Japan, eventually growing into the cute real-life sim that we know today. The brightest star in O2 was the reappearance of a certain space bounty hunter. Once in a blue moon, a new Metroid game will materialize, and this year it was Metroid Prime. Retro Studios' masterpiece would take on the long-awaited challenge of bringing the desolate and eerie world of the Metroid series into 3D, and they knocked it out of the park. Choosing to remove the series from the Metroidvania platforming that made it so notarized to a first-person shooter was a big risk, but it paid off with colossal acclaim, winning many Game of the Year honors from fans and critics alike, currently sitting at the 20th spot on one of the biggest critic rankings online. 2003 would be a heavy-hitting year for the company. Wario would add to his repertoire with Wario World, as well as debuting the new WarioWare series. My favorite Mario Golf installment, Toadstool Tour, would release this year as well. Mario Kart Double Dash would put an interesting spin on the Mario Kart formula. F-Zero and Star Fox returned with F-Zero GX and Star Fox Adventures, but in my eyes, the year belonged to Zelda. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker is simply one of the most wonderful games I've ever played. In context to the year, people were vexed and confused that the cinematic Zelda franchise had taken this cartoony art style and tone. They were promised an action-packed and darker-toned Zelda on par with the ones from the N64, based on an infamous Space World teaser, and they got an incredibly alluring story, an open water world that feels larger than life on the GameCube, a polished to near perfection Z targeting system, a beautiful story of values, and of course, music that could draw tears. The cel-shaded style would branch off into Zelda titles in the future and eventually lead to the Link endearingly called Toon Link. The next new thing from Nintendo in 2004 was the Nintendo DS, the successor to the Game Boy with fascinating sales point of a two-screen clamshell system with a touch screen to boot. However, there wasn't much to report on in its first year, highlighted by a revamped port of Super Mario 64. On the GameCube though, Pikmin netted its first sequel in Pikmin 2. Same with Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Still, this year goes to Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. The second entry in the Paper Mario series, Thousand Year Door is underscored by its cast of characters, RPG polish, and solid story, considered to many, including myself, as the series' best. This year is a tricky one for me in particular, as there are a few candidates that I'd be willing to pick. I nearly went with Pokemon Emerald, as the series has yet to be represented despite being one of the most successful for Nintendo. Generation 3 has always been my personal favorite, but the Pokemon mainline series as a whole has never pushed the needle to put itself above Nintendo's best every year. Mario and Luigi Partners in Time was the underrated Mario and Luigi series' first title on the DS, merging the turn-based RPG gameplay of Paper Mario with some platforming synonymous to the Mario franchise. Nintendogs was a puppy sim game that has become an integral part of the DS's legacy, but my safe choice will have to be Mario Kart DS. The handheld racer would polish the MK formula and become the third highest selling DS game, only behind New Super Mario Bros. And Nintendogs, and to its benefit, MKDS remains as the best 3D Mario Kart on the handheld. Well, kinda. 2006 was an interesting year. The DS library began to fill out, with titles like Brain Age, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, New Super Mario Bros., Yoshi's Island DS, and Metroid Prime Hunters. Mother 3, although infamously never leaving Japan, was released for the Game Boy Advance this year. More importantly, after a short 5-year cycle, Nintendo was already determined to move on from the GameCube and introduce a new console. Welcome to the Wii era. Nintendo's latest hardware was one of a kind, to say the least. The odd controller and motion control gimmick would open the market to more than just the normal gaming demographic, and the new approach the Big N was taking couldn't be more evident in their packaged showcase in Wii Sports. Wii Sports allowed players to play involving games of golf, baseball, tennis, bowling, and boxing using the revolutionary Wii motion controls. In part of the success of the Wii itself, Wii Sports would become the fourth highest selling game ever and would come to define the era of when Nintendo completely flipped the market on its head right when it seemed that their dominance had completely fizzled out. As the Wii shook up the market, the games began rolling in. Wii Play, WarioWare Smooth Moves, Super Paper Mario, Mario Party 8, Mario Strikers Charged, and Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Not to leave out the DS, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, DK Jungle Climber, Picross DS, and Mario Party DS. Even the big hitters in Metroid and Zelda re-emerged, with Twilight Princess releasing for both the Wii and the GameCube respectively the year prior, and Metroid Prime 3 Corruption rounding out the trilogy of Retro Studios' stellar series. But speaking of stellar, it was the mustached man who took the cake with the interstellar Super Mario Galaxy. Thrusting the classic platforming of Mario into outer space, Galaxy made use of the Wii's unique skill set, pairing it with exciting gravity physics and a classic Mario story. Galaxy would go on to quite literally take the year, winning a majority of the highest gaming honors in 2007 for its amazing score and refreshing new environment for the iconic franchise. A sprinkling of games would behold a lineup for 08. Most notably, the long-anticipated third installment of the Super Smash Bros. Series in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, the most demarcating title in the series due to its stark contrast to the well-beloved Melee. I personally commend Brawl for being the game that raised me growing up. Other games of the year included Advance Wars, Days of Ruin, Animal Crossing City Folk, and Kirby Superstar Ultra. As blockbuster of a release as Smash Brawl was, the better title of that year was Mario Kart Wii. The pure polish of MK Wii, along with the neat features like the Wii Wheel, the detailed character roster, the iconic stages, and the then new online play, would make it a fan favorite in the community for years following its release. As we edged towards the new decade, the Nintendo train kept pushing strong. New Super Mario Bros. Wii brought the refurbished side-scrolling Mario formula to the home console. Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story would produce the best acclaim in the Mario and Luigi series, and one of my favorite games ever, Punch-Out!, would mark a long, and I mean long overdue return to the series. Accompanied with an art style that benefited the exaggerated characters of Punch-Out!, it remains one of the most underrated titles of the Wii's library. But Wii Sports Resort is a special case. Building on the hit concept of Wii Sports and created as a showcase for the updated Wii Motion Plus, Resort places that format on the tropical archipelago of not Mario, Woohoo Island, expanding both the surrounding world and the games themselves, and generating a final product that is a cult classic and a load of fun for everyone. A new decade and a whole lot of games. WarioWare DIY, Kirby's Epic Yarn, Metroid Other M, Golden Sun Dark Dawn, Art Academy, and Endless Ocean Blue World. The biggest releases would be Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Donkey Kong Country Returns. With Galaxy 2 only added to the outstanding game that was its predecessor, it's hard not to give this year to the critically acclaimed sequel. But once more, Retro Studios would take up the challenge to revive another important series from the 90s, and that would work their magic once again. And the game's title advertises the alluring rhythmic and careful gameplay established in the legendary trilogy from Rare has been ceremoniously revived for the Wii, to great extol at that. In 2011, the DS would finally get a successor at last with the Nintendo 3DS. The new handheld used its attention-grabbing Glasses 3 3D capabilities as a gimmick to attract consumers. But gimmicks don't mean a thing if the console doesn't have any games to play, and the 3DS came out swinging. Super Mario 3D Land, Nintendogs and Cats, Mario Kart 7, Pokemon Rumble Blast, and Pilot Rings Resort. The Wii was still doing great with games like Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Olympic Games, Mario Sports Mix, a personal favorite, the recently re-released The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, and my 2011 pick in Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Like DKC Returns, the game's restoration to the Kirby of old results in a tried and true platformer that perfectly embodies the enjoyment of classic Kirby gameplay. After 6 great years for the company, Nintendo decided to move on to their next venture in the Wii U. The Wii U as a console was... but the new system would make its debut with Nintendo Land and New Super Mario Bros. U. Although the Wii wasn't done yet, with great entries like Rhythm Heaven Fever and the new and imposing Xenoblade Chronicles, the most impressive game of the year would come from the most unexpected of places. On the 3DS, Kid Icarus. Yes, the same Kid Icarus that hasn't been mentioned in this video since I covered 1987. The same Kid Icarus that hasn't had a game since 1991 would go on to gift us with Kid Icarus Uprising. The handheld gem truly impressed me with its lively characters, fun 3D rail shooting third-person gameplay in the air, and involved storyline, and we're still waiting on a follow-up nearly a decade later. This year had a lot of great candidates, really coming down to the type of fan you are. On one hand, Pokemon X and Y took the well-cemented mainline formula into a polygonal space on the 3DS. In another corner, Pikmin 3 saw the long-desired return to the unappreciated series. Then again, Fire Emblem Awakening was arguably the best game of the Fire Emblem series in recent memory. And on top of that, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds was a fantastic homage to the SNES opus, as well as being another phenomenal Zelda campaign in its own right. But in all honesty, I got the most dopamine from playing Super Mario 3D World. After years of New Super Mario Bros. Fatigue, the triumphant music and exuberant change in gameplay made me sit down and enjoy a Mario game for the first time in a while. I have a couple of favorites this year as well. Tomodachi Life was one of those weird titles that I never took too seriously at first before spending hours and hours playing. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker was exactly what the fans wanted after getting a teaser of the puzzle platforming stages in 3D World. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was more of the same acclaimed platforming that has become the norm for the franchise. The viral release of the year was Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, Smash 4 for sure. And while there are obvious reasons why a Smash game should own the year, but that would undermine how big Mario Kart 8 is. MK8 was the next step in the Mario Kart franchise. Mario Kart 8 would become the definitive installment of one of the most impactful multiplayer franchises of all time. And to this day, ironically as we near 8 years since its initial release, Mario Kart 8 is still the go-to experience for a kart racer, sitting comfortably as the 8th best-selling game ever. As it became clear that the Wii U may not hold up as Nintendo's flagship console for much longer, Nintendo would have to push some new and exciting titles to keep the failed system afloat. There were new installments for Mario Party, Yoshi, Kirby, and Mario Tennis, with the most impressive of that bunch including Xenoblade Chronicles X and the viral sensation that stemmed from Super Mario Maker. But the game that took my world by storm in 2015 was the new kid on the block, Splatoon. I love everything about Splatoon, and the series left a great impression on me that year. The game's commitment to its theme and aesthetic, Nintendo's unique approach to online shooters, and the fun characters that light up the hub world and the story mode fully justified the uproar Splatoon caused at award shows that year. The final year for the Wii U in the limelight, 2016 was a slow year for Nintendo's hardware. While Pokemania would resurface thanks to Pokemon Go and dominate the summer, rounded out by the October release of Pokemon Sun and Moon, other big releases that year, like Star Fox Zero and Paper Mario Color Splash, wouldn't impress as many hoped. What would impress was Kirby's robot-themed handheld platformer, Kirby Planet Robobot for the 3DS. The Kirby campaign would showcase how solid the Kirby formula has remained over the years, while holding up as one of the best platformers on the 3DS in a short and sweet story. 2017 would mark the resurgence of Nintendo following the Great Depression era that was the Wii U years. It would be due in part to the Wii U's failure that we got the Switch. Perfecting the concept that was seen in the Wii U gamepad, the Switch would market itself as the company's first hybrid console, and the first year of the Switch was absolutely nuclear. Splatoon and Xenoblade Chronicles both received first-rate sequels. Super Mario Odyssey would completely flip the series on its head by pitting the plumber and an enormous sandbox platformer that was the most open the series had been since the days of Mario 64, with praise of similar fashion as well. And speaking on high praise, at launch, the Switch arrived with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The game simply floored everyone. Redefining the series, Breath of the Wild took place in the desolate future of a kingdom 100 years removed from Link. The gameplay merges vast open-world exploration with strategic survival and familiar Zelda cues to tie together a cinematic story. Not only being considered the game of the year in 2017, Breath of the Wild remains as disputably the best game the Switch has to offer, as well as being one of the best games you can play in general. 2018 was another slow year, riddled with ports of older titles, but it didn't matter anyway because it would also be a year blessed with a Smash Bros. Release. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is just that. It is the ultimate and definitive Super Smash Bros. Experience. With every character that has ever graced the franchise, Ultimate truly amalgamates everything wonderful about Smash over the years. Arguably the most continuously viral game in recent memory, Ultimate continues to hold relevance over not only the active Nintendo community, but the gaming sphere as a whole. The biggest releases of 2019 included Super Mario Maker 2, Yoshi's Crafted World, Pokemon Sword and Shield, the series' first mainline titles on a home console, and Fire Emblem Three Houses. But this year goes to Luigi's Mansion 3. As the game featured beautiful graphics and fantastic level design in a spectacular return to the series following the underwhelming sequel on the Nintendo 3DS. 2020 was a strange year, and like everything else, Nintendo titles were greatly impacted by the global crisis. We still got a handful of notable games like Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, Paper Mario The Origami King, and Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Out of the dark of last year though, one game would benefit from the circumstances and bring people together while everyone was stuck apart and indoors. Animal Crossing New Horizons would open right as the world had to close, and it resulted in the title becoming the best-selling game in the franchise from just its first week sales, and the 15th best-selling game of all time thanks in part to its 34 million sales in total. The cozy and managerial nature of the series proved perfect for the situation at hand and provided a well-deserved spike in popularity for the underappreciated Nintendo staple. And finally, that brings us to the current year, 2021. There have already been some great releases like Bravely Default 2, Monster Hunter Rise, and WarioWare Get It Together. Just to predict as we enter the final months of this year, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that the highly hyped and anticipated Metroid Dread will take the cake as the best Nintendo game of this year. The return to the 2D side-scrolling action that immortalized the franchise is sure to deliver an incredible experience once again. That being said, we finally reached the end of this list, every single year from 1985 to now. If you've made it to the end of the video, honestly, bless your heart. I truly appreciate you. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. 1K is on the way, ladies and gentlemen. And before you tear me apart in the comments because I might have glossed over your favorite game, let me know what game you're looking forward to in 2022. Evidently, it's been almost 40 years of amazing Nintendo video games, and I can't wait for what's next in store. Once again, I just want to shout out Nintendo Hero for giving me the idea for this lengthy video, and shout out all the hard workers that made these hundreds of games I mentioned today possible. And as always, good game, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace! God, man. I'm never making a video this long again.